questions? Yes, ma'am.
Nation as it is used, especially in the Old Testament, and the nation as you were just reading?
Yes, there is a difference, I think. Let me suggest that the nation of Israel was the attempt to single out not a group of people who were so wonderful, but a group of people through whom the Messiah would come to the rest of the world. And for that purpose, they were given the law to be holy, but a holiness that was not to be anchored in their nationality, in their belonging to Israel, but a holiness that would be extended to anyone coming into the house, anyone coming into the city. One law for alien and citizen. And so it was a nation in the sense that there is a need to separate truth from falsehood, holiness from whatever, corruption. But that holiness was not exclusive to the people of Israel. Oh, if there would only be more. That's why the Queen of Sheba came and said, how happy is the people that has a God like you have, and tell us about him. And so Israel was to be a nation of a particular people. But again and again in the Old Testament it says, you know, I didn't choose you because you were great or because you were wonderful or because you were Israelites. But as I used to say in Russia when people were surprised that I as a German was not anti-Semitic, that I said, you know, God had to single out a person to make the Messiah come in real history. And the reason he chose Abraham is because he still believed God. The others didn't. The others believed river gods. And so he calls Abraham out and says, I'll make of you a great nation. But a nation of tellers, a nation of servants, a nation of law keepers, you know, who in the insanity of what paganism produces would express the rule of law, which is Ferguson's one of the 6 applications that made the West, was the rule of law. And so it was a nation, but it wasn't a nation to be nationalistic. It was a nation as a testimony to the existence of God and his character. And thus the Bible distinguishes, I'm sorry, just one more thing, thus the Bible distinguishes between the national promise to Israel and the spiritual promise to Israel. The national promise to Israel is there'll be a people of Israel and their capital is Jerusalem. And that's where I will reveal myself. The spiritual Israel is everybody who believes in God's promises. That's what I used to say in Russia, you know, the reason I'm not anti-Semitic is because I believe the same thing that Abraham believed, with the difference he looked ahead and I looked back. But otherwise we believe the same thing.
You say that in classical Greece, the society or the metropolis was more important than the individual, and that the Marxists and Leninists took that as an example. And lastly, I very much enjoyed your lecture, and if you were print out the future speeches in this church, I'd like to have it at the end.
Thank you. Yes, I think, well, in a sense, yes. What you observe, I think, is accurate, though much more could be said about it. I would also say that there are not many options. You know, there's either Christianity or not 1,000 different options. You know, either you value human beings or you don't. Either the mind matters or it doesn't. What the Greeks were so concerned with at the time of Plato, Socrates, and Aristotle is how do we get an orderly city, which is, you know, the way many Christians are concerned today. How do I get an orderly family? And unhappily, most Christians insist on some kind of dictatorship of the parents. That's one solution, you know, just keep people from thinking, make them shut up. A child is to be seen, not heard, was what my father heard when he was a child. I didn't hear this from my father. You know, he learned to argue, he learned to stand for himself, he distanced himself tremendously from what was going on in Germany in the 30s. He Well, that's a different story, but it's wonderful. But, you know, the way to control the situation is to be boss. Or to agree that there is a truth to the universe that's accessible. Let's find it out together. Let's sharpen each other to be more precise, more careful, more persistent, more passionate about finding that out. And that will be the Christian way, the Bible's way, the way Moses argues with God, the way Job says, you know, if God only would show himself and tell my friends how wrong they are. And Jesus says, you know, if I dread this hour, yet for this hour I've come into the world. You know, there's an argumentation in it to express what is true. And so, yes, I think it's much easier to be a tyrant, except that you don't have any people to learn things from or to enjoy. And so, yeah, but I think, well, you see, for the Marxists in the 19th century, Hegel gave this wonderful substitute for Christianity, that there's no God out there before whom I would be responsible. I'm just rather on this boat that runs down the river of history. And isn't it exciting? The landscape changes all the time. And I don't have to explain to God my actions. I can just be optimistic about this progress that's taking place. And so history is driven by the Spirit of God. And I'm rocking along on it. There were, as a consequence to his lectures, there were two kinds of Hegelians that followed, the right-wing Hegelians and the left-wing Hegelians. The right-wing Hegelians said, well, if it's happening that way and it's scientific, and he went back to all the conflicts and the way the conflicts advanced history, if that's taking place anyway, I can just drink my beer, play cards, and observe it. That's fatalism. The left-wing Hegelians said, if this is indeed the way history advances, let's give it an additional kick. Let's produce the conflict. Let's not wait until it happens historically or naturally. Let's create the conflict. Let's advance it. Those were the left-wing Hegelians. That was Marx, Engels, Feuerbach, and others. But again, you know, it gives you a position of power, of a sense of resolution, in the sense that no loose ends. You know, a table discussion is an untidy affair. You don't know who's going to make what comment. You may have to finish dinner before the conversation is finished, and you come back to it the next day. It's untidy, but most creative, most stimulating, most honorable to the participant, individual human beings. You know, the parents who, as they did back then, and some unhappily still do today, don't have their children participate in the conversation, have a quieter dinner time, but their life is far more boring because they don't have all the contributions of other people, their own offspring. And so, you know, that's why I say there aren't many options. You either have order, tidiness, or untidiness. Untidiness is creative, it's challenging, it's rejuvenating, whatever, but it's unresolved. And after all, that's the situation we live in. You know, after the fall, we're no longer in the garden where we walk quietly in perfection, in a perfect environment, and nothing troubles us. We now live in a world outside of the garden. There are all kinds of things that are not the mind of God, expressing the mind of God, that should trouble us. That's why we have Lennox Hospital over here, because there are a lot of things that should trouble us. And happily, there's some people there who care for it. We shouldn't just sit there and say, well, God is ordained, or, you know, that's the way the ball bounces, or you had it coming to you, or, you know, nothing is out of order. No, no. It's a disorderly world. Happily, the Bible tells me that. It doesn't pretend it's anything other than that. But yeah, I think the lure is to resolve something already. To put a pink ribbon around things and say, it was meant to be. That was our destiny. That's what you get in most funerals. Somehow it was God's will. Had a good life. We all got to die. You know, this kind of wrapping up, as it were, as if it were fine, when it should be outrageous.
Yeah, I was just thinking